A reading from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 21. When they had come near Jerusalem and had reached Bethphage at the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, "Go into the village ahead of you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied and a colt with her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says to you, just say this, 'The Lord needs them,' and he will send them immediately." This took place to fulfill what had been spoken through the prophet, saying, "Tell the daughter of Zion, look, your king is coming to you, humble and mounted on a donkey, and on a colt, the foal of a donkey." The disciples went and did as Jesus had directed them. They brought the donkey and the colt and put their cloaks on them, and he sat on them. A very large crowd spread their cloaks on the road, and others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road. The crowds that went ahead of him and that followed were shouting, "Hosanna to the Son of David! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord! Hosanna in the highest!" When he entered Jerusalem, the whole city was in turmoil, asking, "Who is this?" The crowds were saying, "This is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth in Galilee." This is the gospel of Christ. Praise to Christ the Word.
Well, as I said earlier, each of us have become conscious of living in a bubble. It's a kind of word that's now used. We have this space. I don't mean outer space or the great frontier, I mean the space that we are inhabiting. And so I've become conscious of space. And I've become conscious of how, at least for me, the space has shrunk quite a bit. I have driven the car only once, and I've walked only as far as the edge of the neighbourhood. And this space in which we live has become the space in which we not only eat and sleep and relax, but the space in which we work. And I know that for many of us, this is the place from which we teach, or which we provide counselling, or that we lead, or we make decisions, or we engage with our employees. All of the things that we're now doing from our homes or the places that we're our bubble, that we weren't doing before. And for me, the space, I'm very fortunate that I can look out from our space to the trees and the clouds and notice how many cats go through our property. But we've become conscious of space. And so today I want us to think about space in relation to Palm Sunday. Palm Sunday is a crucial transition, but also the space from which Jesus has come to get here, then of him travelling through the Jerusalem gate, and then the space to this incredible space, which is the cross, and then the space along. That's the momentum of the sermon. But let's begin with Jesus gathering with his disciples just before they enter the gates of Jerusalem. Well, it is Palm Sunday, as I've said, and Jesus has hitherto been travelling freely from place to place, and he's been healing and teaching, and they've been conversing and partying, and he's been calling, people have been following. But here they are now on the outskirts of Jerusalem with a colt and a donkey. They've come to this gate, this transition to a different space, a space that's much more risky, much more dangerous, where the authorities are waiting and watching, where powerful forces are lurking down these dark, narrow streets, and where somewhere in a building somewhere people of influence are talking and planning, because one way or the other, this movement has to be shut down. And in the meantime, the people, it seems from Matthew, don't know what to make of all this fuss. Who are these people? And I can imagine them peering from their balconies, or complaining about the noise, or closing their doors to keep out the sound. Is it just another irritating procession? Are these more of those irritating, troublesome people from Galilee? And there are bystanders observing, and there are people, I imagine, who are deeply suspicious. So we're through the gates now, and we're into this Jerusalem space. And as the week progresses, and as we move closer towards the cross, followers fall away, and even the closest run. It seems that they couldn't keep up with his praying, and they didn't have his determination, and so he became steadily more isolated until, as we know, the shouts of Hosanna became the shouts of crucify him. And the space closed in on him, shutting him down, pressing him under, which is, of course, exactly what the authorities wanted to have happen. And now he becomes a solitary figure, yes, with one or two alongside his mother, some friends, but he carries his own cross, and it's lifted up, and he is lifted onto it, and there he is nailed. And with two criminals, he dies. Naked, alone, cursed, betrayed, forsaken, crucified. And on that cross, what had been so spacious and so inclusive, remember the Samaritan woman at Jacob's well? Remember the poor fishers being called from their nets? Remember the tax collector being called from his desk? Remember the religious communities that Jesus reached out to? Remember the people who'd been sick for many years that somehow had received healing? There were so many people, so much ministry, so much expansiveness. And all of that free-ranging ministry now became focused. A lonely, shut-down criminal nailed to a cross. It was a pinpoint, a vortex, a focus. He'd been in Galilee. He came through the Jerusalem gate. He'd walked. And now it was this, so small a space. And yet, on that cross, through the utter commitment of Jesus to the way of God, the way of non-violence, the way of love, free love, there opened out for you and for me the most spacious life we can ever know. Through that most narrow of ways, the death of Jesus on a cross, the broadest of love was let loose in our world. And we were ushered in to this open space of acceptance and incredible inclusion. It became, and it is for us, a place of freedom, to move, to explore, and most of all, to know that we're loved, and in turn to love. Through the cross of Christ, we were ushered, through the smallest of spaces, we were ushered in to the very realm of God. In Philippians, we read that God empties God's self. Well, emptying, making space, clearing the clutter for you and for me. And so we're able to make space for others in care, staying home so that other people are protected, and we ourselves as well, making phone calls, talking to neighbours over the back fence, buying groceries for people where we can, praying for the people in our street, putting a palm branch on our letterbox, finding a window to place a bear, sending a message of encouragement, and still giving to people in need what we can. We can't process outside on the street, but we can process inside. And we can go with Jesus this week. We've passed now through the gates of Jerusalem, and we can go with him now, through the Garden of Sorrows, and along the Via Dolorosa, until we ourselves come to that tiny space, the cross. And there we can know for ourselves, and we know for many others, that we live in the spaciousness of God, the most incredible realm in which you can live in even the smallest of spaces. May it be so for you, for those you love, for those you pray for the people we long for to know God's love.